after the FBI report came back and basically just confirmed what the Senate investigation proved, which is, of course, that there is no evidence, no corroboration of any of the allegations against Judge Kavanaugh. Here to go through what has been a horrible 17 days for him and his family. I don't know if he ever gets his good name back in the end. I don't think people will ever forget what he has gone through and the allegations that have been made against him as former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. And this, of course, all with the backdrop 33 days from now, the most important midterm election in our lifetime. Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us. The FBI report is back. Now the Democrats want more FBI investigations. Nothing seemingly will ever satisfy them.
I thought, first of all, it was great that you were actually on the air. I think he and Lindsey Graham were the two Republicans who did the best job of getting us where we are now. I get the impression, you may have more information than I do, but I get the impression from what Senator Flake said earlier today that he is now believes that there's nothing there, that the FBI found nothing to corroborate. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to get all three Republicans, which would be a terrific moment and would guarantee, of course, the confirmation of a new Supreme Court justice. And what I think is a great victory for the American system and the American sense of fairness. I just think to have Judge Kavanaugh validated, to have him sworn in, to have his family be able to realize that he is now a Supreme Court justice would be such an act of decency after all of the viciousness that I'm really looking forward to it.
The results are now in polling, and we're seeing it in the Fox News poll that now shows that Heidi Heitkamp, who is a no on Judge Kavanaugh in North Dakota, she's down by 11. It's going to be interesting to watch what Joe Manchin does. Joe Donnelly in Indiana is a no. We know Claire McCaskill is a no. We have a battle going out. Martha McSally, I think, is a great Senate candidate for Arizona, served her country with incredible honor and distinction, and Dean Heller in Nevada and Rick Scott in Florida. But these numbers today are interesting as President Trump's approval rating is now matched his all-time high at 50%. And more importantly, we've got a Rasmussen poll that says, well, the latest survey, 56% of likely voters agree with Judge Kavanaugh's statement to the Senate Judiciary Committee Friday of last week that his confirmation hearings have become a, quote, national disgrace. Well, then it raises questions about what impact this might have on the midterm elections in 33 days, because midterm election polling is getting more definitive. The enthusiasm gap is closed almost to a dead-even halt, and you see Republicans in important Senate races now in dead heats in all of these states, that red states where Democrats, where Trump has won by fairly big margins.
Well, I'm going to go a stage further. I think when we see that moment when Judge Kavanaugh becomes Justice Kavanaugh, and we see that first time when he is sitting in the Supreme Court, I think a large part of the left is just going to collapse in morale. They have done everything they could. They went all out. They lied. They smeared. They did everything you can imagine, and they lost. And I think that the morale effect on the left is going to be substantial. Chuck Schumer's strategy failed, and the fact is that in the process, he may well have crippled his party for a generation. A good friend of mine called today and said, there's one team out there trying to build things. They're called Republicans. And there's one team out there trying to destroy things. They're called Democrats. And he said to me, I just don't think Americans, are going to vote for the destroyers. And I thought that was a pretty good way to capture what we have been living through.
I have often said, and we've been friends going back since 1990, maybe even a little before that, and I have often said you can predict this with certainty every 2 and 4 years, that identity politics, it's rich versus poor, old versus young, black versus white, whatever divisive nature of politics they can bring up comes up every election year, but they have now sunk to a new low. I knew this was not going to be a difficult job for the FBI. In the case of Professor Ford, there was no place, there was no time, there was no location. There's no place for the FBI to visit to look for anything forensically that might exist. And the only 4 people that they could really talk to are the 4 people Professor Ford mentioned that she remembered being at this so-called party when the alleged event happened, and she identified one person that was supposed to be a eyewitness to the assault, and the eyewitness said that did not happen. And the other people do not remember any such party as this. And then the question is, do we believe in the presumption of innocence, or are we just going to jump the gun and say guilt by association? Cory Booker said something spectacular yesterday, and he goes, well, if there's enough allegations out there, I mean, you got to kind of believe it, and they're not qualified based on allegations.
Well, look, I mean, let's be clear. Cory Booker, sadly, somebody who I used to think had a real future as a reformer, has just sort of decayed. I mean, I don't know whether it's because he wants to run for president or what, but he's just kind of decayed into almost making a mockery of himself. I mean, he talks about having a Spartacus moment, which is a sign of such stunning historical ignorance. As a history teacher, I found it painful. He makes comments like that. I mean, he of all people should know that if allegations destroy you, then the whole process of the rule of law collapses over totally. And it's sad to watch somebody like that, you know, who I think could have been a positive, constructive force, and who's now, frankly, becoming almost a caricature of himself.
There's certainly a lot at stake in the next 33 days, and, you know, there's other good economic news that have come out today. I mean, on top of record low unemployment in 14 states, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workforce, youth unemployment 50-some-odd year low. We have consumer confidence all-time high, 4 million new jobs created, 4 million fewer people on food stamps. You see what the president's accomplished with NAFTA, the new NAFTA, the new trade agreement with Mexico and with Canada. You see that he has eliminated burdensome regulation. We can now drill in ANWR in the 48 states. He has literally single-handedly saved coal mining in America. And, of course, natural gas production will now be at an all-time high. And we have a Wall Street Journal piece today showing more Americans getting pay raises than ever before. Now, that's the forgotten men and women that mattered in 2016. The question is, will they all go out and vote to protect the progress that has been made in the last 2 years, even maybe if they don't particularly like their individual Republican congressman, or maybe think they're weak, or maybe don't even know who their name is?
Well, you just put your finger on the key question of this election. As you know, I've been involved in many, many campaigns, actually going all the way back to 1960. And one of the lessons I learned was, I don't care about the polls. Show me the precincts. I want to see the first real votes. I want to see who cares enough to show up and vote, because that changes everything. As you know, we just won a 63% Hispanic district in a special election for the state Senate in Texas, right down along the border. And we had a candidate who got lost by 20 points 4 years ago, came back in the special and won, and is the first Hispanic Republican state senator in Texas. And that's because people were energized enough to turn out. So I would say to everybody in our audience, what this is going to come down to isn't polling. It isn't conversation at the coffee shop. Who cares enough to get an absentee ballot? Who cares enough to show up and vote? And if our side does show up and vote, I think this could be one of the most historic elections that you and I have ever covered. We've been together for lots of elections. I have a hunch this one could turn into something that we would, the rest of our lives...
Well, behind the scenes, I got to give you a lot of credit, because I remember speaking with you, you probably forget it, the day before you became Speaker of the House. This is in 1994, and I remember talking to you that day and the day of the election, and you were surrounded by a group of people, and Joe Gaylord, and you actually shared with me the information you had, and you said it was absolutely true that for the first time in 40 years, Republicans would take over the House. I think you and I were two of the few people willing to go out on a limb and said, yeah, Donald Trump has a real shot of winning this election, and people laughed at us at the time, and I believed it then, and we proved out to be right. We also, both of us, predicted Obama would be an abysmal failure as president based on a very rigid ideology that he seemed to be indoctrinated into. And I agree with you. I think there is an opportunity here to shock the world again. And for the people listening to this audience, they're going to tune in 33 nights from now, watch election results come in, and they're either going to see giddy, happy, liberal newscasters announcing Nancy Pelosi as Speaker and Chuck Schumer's the Senate Majority Leader, and Maxine Waters will be the chairman of this committee or that committee, and that the impeachment of Trump will go forward, taxes will go up, open borders will remain, and Obamacare stays, all this, or they're going to shock the world, and all these people are going to do what they did in 2016 and be in the shock of their life.
Well, that's right. Now, look, I mean, I think what I would say to everybody who's listening to us, everybody who cares about the country's future, make sure you vote, make sure your friends vote, make sure everybody you know who favors a solid, productive, work-oriented, results-oriented system, make sure they go out and vote. If that happens, I'm not quite ready yet to predict, but I am willing to tell you that because of the intensity of anger about the way the liberals smeared Kavanaugh, the characterization, the dishonesty, I believe we have seen, and I've been looking at data for 3 days, I believe that we have seen a substantial shift towards the Republicans. I think that we're almost certainly now going to keep the Senate and probably going to increase the total number of senators by a significant margin.
Well, Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, who's down 11, is a no on Kavanaugh. To me, put a fork in that race, it's over.
Yeah, well, again, I think Kramer, who's a great, great guy, and I've known for 24 years, he's got to get out there and keep campaigning. Well, I mean, one of the lessons is, I had very close races, including a couple of recounts, and I had very big races. My experience is, and I say this to every candidate, do not quit till the polls close, and do not relax until the recount is over. This is a business where big things can happen very fast. The American people are in charge, not Bloomberg's $100 million, not Soros's millions, not any of those left-wingers. In the end, the genius of America is that the American people are in charge, and I believe that they're going to send a big signal to the left-wingers that they really they don't want to live in a country where you smear, lie, assassinate character, and believe that you can get away with it.
I even think I think they like to bludgeon people with absolutely zero consideration of the impact that has on them, families, with a total disregard for any truth or corroboration. All right, quick break, right back. More with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. All right, more with Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Now, I will say this. If we allow this to get rewarded and they get power as a result of this, or, look, we're not going to know till Saturday if, in fact, Judge Kavanaugh is confirmed. And, I hope Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski are satisfied. I know Susan Collins says she was satisfied with the FBI report, and Jeff Flake said the same thing. I don't know where Lisa Murkowski is. She has not spoken publicly as of now. But I hope we don't reward this behavior, because if we do, to me, it becomes a tipping point in the country where you're just going to get more of this. And anybody that the Democrats don't like is going to be subject to guilt by accusation and this type of smearing and slandering that goes on. I'd also like to see a change in the standard in the law. If you're a public figure, well, you have to show the absence of malice. How do you prove an absence of malice? It's a ridiculous standard that nobody could ever reach, which is why people like you and me, whatever people say about us, we get stuck taking it.
So, look, let me just say, I think that overwhelmingly the American people do not want to reward that kind of behavior. And I think you've seen it now. I mean, the kind of surveys we're seeing now are amazing. People have moved very significantly in the last week, and it's in reaction to how despicable and how vicious and how personal the Democrats have been. And they brought this on themselves. And I think that they're now going to reap the whirlwind. All right, Mr. Speaker, thanks for being with us. 33 days till Election Day. Appreciate your time.